Hi guys, this is Mark Heroes. Today going to be working through Luke chapter 14, verses 25 through 34. And this is kind of what intro I would use for a sermon if I was sort of creating one at church. I guess the goal of the assignment was to sort of create a sermon intro or sermon introduction with having now been influenced by Green's writing on Wesley and looking at that and how would that sort of change what I did. So I have an intro that I created that I would normally at church, I would read the passage and then kind of get into the intro leading into the sermon. It's Luke 14, 25 through 34. It's the section of the cost. The heading in the Bible would say the cost of being a disciple. Looking through it, it's I wouldn't read the whole thing here, but I would at church. But here it's the section portion of Scripture where Jesus, large crowds were following him, and he stopped and he talked about people coming to him and said, if anyone comes to me and doesn't hate his father, mother, wife, children, sister, brother, can't be my disciple. Talked about carrying a cross. If you don't carry their cross and follow me, you can't be my disciple. Then he went to this cost counting illustration of someone who sits down. If you're going to build a tower, you want to make sure you have enough money to do it. If you're going to go to war, you want to make sure you have the men to win it. And then if you don't, then you can't. If you don't give up everything, you can't be my disciple. So using that, I would open up that and then kind of go into this. So I would, as we do it, it says as we open up our passage of Scripture, the one word I want us all to think about is this idea of commitment, and specifically the commitment that it takes to be Jesus' disciple. In our passage today, Jesus is calling his disciples to figure out whether the commitment to following him is truly worth it. Does the reward outweigh the cost? Jesus goes into what appears to be great lengths to get people to stop and think about the decision and think about whether or not they're willing to commit and buy in to truly being a disciple. But what does it mean to be a disciple? In that culture, they understood that word discipleship. They understood what that meant. They understood the relationship between the rabbi and the disciples, the students. They understood all of that, whatever that relationship entailed. They got that. In our culture, we hear that word a little bit differently. So it's important to kind of gain a context to understand what they heard and then try to see what we're hearing and how it's a little bit different. So it's important to define then the context of the time there. And to do that, we'll sort of cross-reference a little bit back and forth between some of the other scripture verses that talk about discipleship. We'll also pick a couple of commentaries to kind of work through and see what some of the sort of leading theologians have to say about discipleship as well. We'll try to conquer the idea of after understanding, gaining an understanding of that definition of discipleship, then we'll work on this idea of cost and whether something is really worth it. In our setting and culture, we sort of ask and answer that question all the time, whether something is worth it every day. When we wake up, we have to figure out whether it's worth it to give up the extra half hour of sleep in order to have enough time to get ready. So during that 30 minutes of time, we brush our teeth, we shave, we shower, we put on clean clothes, probably spray some cologne or perfume on. And so the dilemma we face every morning is, do I get up and have the right time to get ready, or do I sleep a little bit longer and have less time and maybe look a little bit more tired, look a little rugged, maybe not smell as clean? So we have this idea of whether or not it's worth it there. Is $4 worth a gallon of gas? It is if you want to drive your own car. It isn't if you ride a bike or walk. Is a hamburger worth $5? At some places, yes. Other places, maybe not. So we all face that kind of dilemma about choice and commitment and cost every day. But what about the commitment to follow Jesus and be his disciple? It's going to cost us if we really want to be his disciple. The way that Jesus describes, to really enter into the discipleship relationship where we've sold out, where we've gone all in for him. There are some costs and some very specific costs, and Jesus is clear and wants us to count those costs and really truly figure out if we're willing to go for it. So as we look upon that commitment, the commitment that it takes to follow Jesus, there's one question that we have to ask ourselves, and answer is it worth it? Is what we get worth it compared to what he calls us to give up? I think it's a very important and valid thing for us to work through and figure out, and that's sort of the goal of the sermon. So with that, let's dive into Luke 14 together.